And even legendary status doesn't exempt you from the bureaucracy. John Glenn, the first American to orbit Earth, one of the most celebrated astronauts in history, had to lobby NASA for 2 years just to be allowed back into space. He eventually flew again at 77 years old as a subject for research on aging. A national hero, fighting paperwork for 2 years to get back into a seat. Because at NASA, rank is real, but so is the institution above it. But not everything inside that institution is grim. On Skylab, astronaut Owen Garriott snuck a recording of his wife's voice onto the station and played it during a communication session with ground control. There were no women on board. The flight controllers heard a woman's voice coming from the station and had no idea what was happening. Garriott had convinced them, for a moment, that there was an unauthorized stowaway on a space station. Inside the most disciplined, highest-stakes chain of command on the planet, someone found a way to mess with the hierarchy. And it worked. So here's where we are. You started this video thinking the astronaut was the top, the person in the suit, on the rocket, doing the thing. And the picture is more complicated than that. The candidate who spends 2 years earning the title. The astronaut who gets space sick and follows a bathroom schedule and reads Russian manuals in an emergency. The flight controller in their late 20s who can stop a billion-dollar mission with a single word. And above all of them, sitting at a console in Houston, never leaving the atmosphere, the flight director. One of fewer than 100 people in history to hold that authority. The system wasn't built to make the astronaut the most powerful person in the room. It was built to keep everyone alive. And that required giving the people closest to the data the power to act on it, no matter their rank. If this kind of breakdown is what you're into, the real structure behind things that look simple from the outside, there's a video on this channel that does the same thing for a completely different world. It's sitting right there. Watch it next, and if you want more of this, subscribe, because this is all we do here. Drop a comment telling me which rank surprised you most. I'm betting it's the one with the kill switch. There are fewer people who have ever run mission control than there are people who have walked on the moon. That's not a metaphor, that's the actual math. And by the time this video is over, you're going to understand exactly what that means. And why the person who never leaves Earth might have more power over your life than the astronaut who does. We're going to walk through every major rank at NASA. From the first person who gets screened out in the application process, all the way up to the single most powerful position in human spaceflight. And look, most content about NASA gives you the highlight reel. The launches, the suits, the astronauts waving from the hatch. What you almost never hear about is how the system actually works. The chain of command, the quiet rules, the moments where someone nobody's ever heard of holds a kill switch over a billion-dollar mission. That's what this is. I'll tell you right now, the rank you think is the top is not the top, and the rank you think is powerless has more authority than you'd believe. We'll get there. But first, let's start at the bottom. You apply to NASA. You've spent your whole life building toward this. A master's degree in a STEM field, at minimum. At least 3 years of related professional experience after your degree, or 1,000 pilot-in-command hours in high-performance jet aircraft, if you're a pilot. You put the application together, you submit it, and then you wait. An evaluation board made up of active astronauts and NASA managers reviews it and narrows the field to several hundred candidates. Then more than 2,000 individual verification checks happen. NASA specialists going through every achievement you listed, every detail of your background. Most people stop here, not because they're unqualified, because the numbers are just brutal. Tens of thousands of people apply, a few hundred make the first cut, and from there, roughly 120 finalists get invited to Johnson Space Center in Houston, where they go through dozens of interviews and medical examinations. You are one of those 120. You fly to Houston. You sit in a room with some of the most accomplished people you've ever met. Doctors, engineers, test pilots, researchers who've spent winters in Antarctica just to have something interesting on their resume. And after all of that, after the interviews and the physicals and the background checks, a small group of people get the call. You think you made it. You didn't. You are now an ASCAN, an astronaut candidate. That designation comes at the end of a highly competitive search process, but that hard-won acceptance is actually just the beginning. You report for training at Johnson Space Center, and spend the next 2 years learning basic astronaut skills, spacewalking, operating the space station, flying T-38 jet planes, controlling a robotic arm. 2 years. And only after those 2 years do you earn the right to call yourself an astronaut. You are not an astronaut yet. You are a candidate. The title is provisional. The job is real. So what does that training actually look like? It's not what you picture. Yes, there's the neutral buoyancy lab, the massive pool where they simulate spacewalks. Yes, there's the centrifuge. But there's also something nobody ever puts in the brochure. You are required to learn Russian. Not conversational Russian, functional, technical, operational Russian. You spend 2 years learning basic astronaut skills, and that list includes things most people never think about, like running the space station if systems fail. The reason for the Russian is specific and serious. All US astronauts have to be able to run the ISS using Russian language training manuals if the English systems go down. The station was built with redundancy across 2 languages. If your side of the system fails, you switch to theirs. And if you can't read the manual, people die. That reframes the whole job. It's not just physical. It's not just technical. It's diplomatic, bureaucratic, and linguistic. You are training to be a person who can function inside a machine built by 2 countries that spent decades pointing nuclear weapons at each other. And you have to do it fluently enough to save lives in a crisis. 2 years pass, you graduate. You are now officially a NASA astronaut. And here's where the fantasy really starts to crack. About 3 out of 4 astronauts get space sick. Even at the highest levels of the profession, the body rebels in ways that have nothing to do with training or willpower. The nausea usually fades within a couple of days, but those first days are rough in a way that nobody really talks about. And there's another one. In microgravity, your body can't tell when your bladder is full. The stretch receptors in your bladder rely partly on the weight of the liquid inside it, and in low gravity, that signal doesn't work the same way. So astronauts are put on a forced schedule. You empty your bladder every 2 hours, whether you feel like you need to or not. Not because someone's being controlling. Because if you don't, you might not realize you need to go until it's too late, and there's no graceful solution to that problem in a spacesuit. This is what the elite rank actually costs. Not just years of your life and a master's degree and the ability to read Russian under pressure. It costs you the basic physical autonomy that every person on Earth takes for granted. You are one of the most accomplished humans alive, and someone is telling you when to use the bathroom. Now here's the thing I want you to hold on to, because this is the open loop that's going to pay off at the end. The astronaut is not the top of the chain of command, not even close. The person with the most authority in human spaceflight is someone who never leaves the building. We'll get there. But first, mission control. Most people think of mission control as a support role, the people on the ground helping the people in space. That's backwards. Mission control is where the decisions get made, and the structure inside that room is one of the most unusual chains of command in any professional environment on Earth. The room itself has a name that almost nobody outside the agency knows. The original Mission Operations Control Room, the one from the Apollo era, had an insider nickname that the people who worked there used constantly. They called it the MOCR, pronounced Mo-Ker. Today, the Flight Control Room is called the FCR, pronounced Ficker. These aren't just trivia. They're the kind of details that tell you whether someone actually knows this world or just watched a documentary about it. Inside that room, you have a team of flight controllers. Each one owns a specific system: propulsion, life support, trajectory, communications. They sit at consoles, they monitor data, and they are the first line of defense when something starts to go wrong. And here's the part that flips the expected power structure completely. A flight controller, someone who might be in their late 20s, relatively early in their career, can unilaterally call for an abort. Any controller can do it. If the data on their console tells them something is catastrophically wrong, they don't have to wait for permission. They call it. And before major mission events, the flight director polls every single controller in the room. Each one gives a go or a no-go. Any one of them can stop the mission. The most junior person in that room holds a kill switch over a multi-billion-dollar operation. That's not a bug in the system. That's the design. Because the person closest to the data is the person most qualified to act on it. And then there's this. In 1962, during the Mercury program, astronaut Scott Carpenter flew the Aurora 7 mission. The capsule made it back, but it landed about 400 kilometers off course, nearly 250 miles from the target zone. The capsule was recovered hours later, northeast of Puerto Rico. This was not a failure of character or courage. It was a reminder that even at peak competence, even with the best people and the best technology of the era, the margin for error in spaceflight is enormous. Precision is the goal, it is never the guarantee. Now let's talk about the rank above flight controller. The person running the room, the flight director, is the single most powerful position in human spaceflight operations. During a mission, the flight director has final authority over everything that happens. Not the astronaut commander on board the vehicle, not NASA headquarters. The flight director. They are the person the controllers report to, the person who synthesizes everything happening across every console in real time, and the person who makes the call when the call has to be made. Gene Kranz, Chris Kraft. The names that actually built the culture of mission control, they were flight directors. And here's the number I mentioned at the beginning. Since Christopher C. Kraft became the first flight director in 1958, the total number of people who have ever held that title is fewer than 100 in the entire history of human spaceflight. It is humbling to look back at the fact that in the history of human spaceflight, there's only been 99 people before me, said Fiona Tourette when she became the 100th. That's a smaller club than astronauts. There have been more humans in space than humans who have run mission control. The person sitting at a console in Houston, never leaving Earth, never suiting up, never training in the pool, that person outranks the astronaut in actual life or death authority. The astronaut executes, the flight director decides.